الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We have been speaking in the last few days about how the correct understanding of being faith, religion can only be that of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the understanding that he conveyed to his companions, and it continued from there onwards. So the immediate question that arises is that how do we have access to this understanding? How do we know what was the Prophet's understanding of faith, of Iman, of being, of religion in general? And what was the understanding that he imparted to his companions? How do we access that? How do we know that this is how the Prophet understood deen and faith, and this is how he taught it to his companions? And to answer that, what we need to do is simply look back at how the history of the message itself. What was happening in the early days of Islam, and how was Islam preserved for eternity. And initially, as we know, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, as the Quran tells us, وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ إِذًا لَارْتَابَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ. The Prophet wasn't expecting to be a prophet. Before being appointed, or before being made into a prophet, or at least made aware that he was a prophet, the Prophet didn't have any interest in it, and he was simply a soul yearning for the truth. He would go out into the mountains of Hira. He would isolate himself from society for contemplation, for meditation. And the word is yadahannath. Yadahannath means he knew that there was this absolute reality, one God, but he just didn't know how to worship him. And tahannuth means that thinking and trying to discover proper means on your own accord, proper means of worshipping the divine. And then revelation comes to him. The clarity it brings is it's immediately obvious to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this is not this is and he knows immediately what it is to be a prophet, that where this inspiration is coming from, where this wahi, revelation, is coming from. And so instantly there is a transformation. The Prophet becomes aware that he is a prophet, he is a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hence now anticipates messages, communications from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regularly, which in the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stop for a little while and then continue and then carry on after that point. So, and then when he conveys this to his companions, to the people around him, of course he didn't have any companions at that point. When we say he didn't have any companions at that point, what we mean by that is that he didn't have widespread following at that time. Because what did immensely help him in his early days as a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the support that he got first and foremost from his wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, who didn't have, and it's amazing, it's striking how she supports him. That Rasulullah, this is what the hadith tells us, that when Rasulullah goes to her and says to her that this happened to me and I am afraid, I fear for myself. And it seems at that point, from the reaction that she gives, it seems as though she is much more clearer. The matter is much more clearer in her mind, because she tells, Wallahi, Allah will never waste you. Allah will never allow you to go to waste, and you do this, and you're good in this way, and you're good in that way. And she supports him and consoles him, as though she had, it seems, she had greater grasp of what the reality of was that Rasulullah that was coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In any case, after that, when he begins to develop a following, they clearly understand what the station of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, what is the meaning of a prophet, and they clearly distinguish between people who can be said to be pretenders to prophethood. So, in a sense, soothsayers are excluded, which in the Meccan society were called Kohan or Kahins, which has relevance to the Hebrew Kohan also. But they are excluded. It's clear to the followers of Rasulullah that the Prophet ﷺ is not a Kahin. It's clear that he's not a sorcerer, he's not a magician, he's not a sahir to them, and they can see the difference. It's clear to them that he is not a majnoon. He is not somebody who is suffering from some kind of a mental illness or who is delusional about what he is seeing and what he is reporting. And they see evidence of this on a daily basis, and which strengthens their iman and their faith. So they have very, very clear understanding of what it means to be a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the role of a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how the prophet of Allah is going to discharge his obligation. And fundamentally, what is their responsibility towards a prophet of Allah, towards the message that is coming to them. And so they take Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as their uswa, as their guide, as their role model in everything. And not just in the early period of Meccan life, but that continues. That is something that continues to develop throughout the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions' understanding of the message, which is the crucial part of it is that they don't see the message as separate from the messenger. And this is important because it seems that it's very clear in their minds that without the messenger there can be no message. And even if and the messenger's task is not simply to deliver the message, but also to live it, to give a practical demonstration, practical example of how this message has to be internalized and then in a sense externalized through our actions and our behavior and our understanding of the world, etc. And from day one, this is clear in the eyes of the companions, and this continues during the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. When people come to him to accept faith, it may not be very clear. The Quran makes a distinction between people or the Arab, who are people of little understanding and whose behavior is more emotional than rational, in a sense. When they come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are inspired and they accept Islam. But Quran makes a distinction that the process of Islam leads to the process of Iman, and that needs to be completed before a person can be transformed from a Muslim to a mu'min. And inshallah, in the next few days, if there is an opportunity, we'll speak about the comprehensive nature of deen. What is the comprehensive understanding of deen, as the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam tells us. But for now, so this process of transformation takes place, again, importantly, not by simply listening to listening to the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, but also by living in the company of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as soon as a person accepts Islam, he or she will try to migrate to, this is obviously post-migration to Medina, they would come to Medina, stay in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a few days, few months, and benefit from his company. And the benefit of the company, obviously, one is a spiritual benefit. The greater benefit or an equal benefit was to understand what it is that a messenger is supposed to do, and how is it that a messenger is supposed to guide us towards the path of success in both lives. So they will observe the behavior of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, model their behavior upon the behavior of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because his enigma is far too, it's in a sense infectious. It would immediately and the Sahaba tell us, report that when you first saw him, you would be overawed. When they first came to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would become overawed at the and this was the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had this effect on them. But when you spoke with him and you lived with him for a while, this awe would transform into a deep love for the person of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَإِذَا خَالَطَهُ مَعْرِفَةً أَحَبَّهُ. And then if they had migrated only for the companionship, then they would go back, or they would stay in Medina, take a residence in Medina, and live with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what the companions learned was that in order to understand and practice and live by the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran and the dictates of the Quran, we have to abide by the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no way we can and the Sahaba understood this very clearly, that there was no way they could suffice on simply the Quran without the Prophet's understanding of it, without the Prophet's explanation for it. And so the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the earthly life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes to an end. A huge group of followers by the end of his noble life, approximately over 124,000 people have entered the fold of Islam, and have not just entered the fold of Islam, but also benefited from the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and from the direct observation of the behavior of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, to varying degrees. Some have stayed some may have just seen him just during the Hajjatul Wada when they all gathered together. Some had spent some time with him in Medina. Some have spent their entire lives with him. Some have been with him since the first day of his, like Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So this was the order of merit. How close you are to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how much support you have physically and monetarily, etc., given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the mission, and that is the basis of merit in Islam. So after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passes away, what happens? Sahaba, many of them remain in Medina, many of them disperse in various lands, many of them are sent as teachers, as guide to newly conquered territories. And they establish schools. And the method of their teaching, crucially, is the same as the method of the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So groups of interested students come to them, a study circle is formed of sorts, and the study is centered on the person of the Sahabi of the Allahu anhu. So we have many examples. For example, just one example, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was sent by Umar radiallahu anhu to Kufa to serve as a teacher, and he lives there. A whole school develops around him. So the point is that the method of teaching deen, teaching religion, continued even after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the exact manner in which it had continued during the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through not just simply through books, not just simply through lectures and study circles, but primarily through companionship. So the companionship of the Sahabi was considered to be of importance, and people stayed with companions. And this is the whole thing how later on it develops into, when we have the sciences of hadith and the study of hadith, how it goes on that you attach yourself to a teacher, and that you join in a silsila, in a chain of transmitters from that teacher. And so this whole thing, as we know, we know that hadith has chain of transmitters. This whole understanding of this chain of transmitters is not simply that you go to a person, you take hadith. No, you go to a person, you stay in his or her company for a while at least, to understand and to model your behavior upon theirs. And the criterion for acceptance of hadith is, there are two things. One is a person has to be academically sound. That's one condition. And the other condition, a person has to be sound in their faith and practice. And this second condition is important, because what it tells us is that if a person, though may be academically sound and has a great potential there, but if a person is has not internalized the lifestyle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of his companions, of his own teachers, and is not committed to the practice of faith as such, then his knowledge is of no use, and you will not accept a hadith from them. And as an example, one of the great muhaddithin, he travels, this is mentioned in books of hadith, that he travels very far, a huge distance, a significant distance, to get to a particular muhaddith to learn some hadith from him. And when he arrives there, he arrives to the person's house, he sees that the muhaddith, or the teacher, or the supposed teacher, is leading his horse to the stable by giving him, showing some grass, and then as the horse draws closer, he moves the hand back. And this was enough for this visitor to determine that this person was not worthy of being learned from. Why? Because he said that if he can deceive a horse like that, an animal, then how can I trust him with the tradition of, or with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I will not learn from him. This is how scrupulous they were. And so my point is that this scrupulousness was actually was not something external to the tradition, was in fact part of the tradition, was an integral aspect of the tradition. And so you needed to be to have adopted the lifestyle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ultimately, and of his companions, to be able to be a participant in the culture of knowledge, or in the production of knowledge of Islam. And then from there, so we have the silsila, which then develops into schools of fiqh, which are essentially regional, because Imam Hanifa, his sources are largely based in Iraq. Imam Malik, his sources are largely based in Medina. And one of the things that they consider is the custom. And why are they considering the custom of the locality around them? Because they think, they know that this custom has continued from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can be traced back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and hence they give a lot of value to the custom of their times, of the customs of the scholars around them, because this is and broadly this is the definition, this is the understanding of sunnah. Sunnah means a custom, ultimately the custom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which they believed was preserved through the practice of or through public practice, and hence public practice becomes a reference point. And so still we are looking for a correct understanding of Deen. We are looking at the custom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was only at the time of Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi, may Allah reward him and grant him the loftiest rank in paradise, who had the foresight to think that if we of course we are following the sunnah, we want to establish our deen based upon the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but as time goes along, obviously the custom cannot preserve itself. There will be additions, or custom will change. We will have things which are not part of the sunnah, which will become part of the custom, and will ultimately be seen as part of the sunnah. And so hence he thinks that there is a need for external verifiability of the custom. And what he does effectively is he splits the sunnah or the custom into two aspects. One is the practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is called hadith, or the source of which is hadith, and then the custom of the community or the consensus of the community, which is called ijma'. So he says these are not, until now they were considered as one thing. From now on they must be considered as two separate things, and they must then be understood as distinct entities and must be approached as such. And for this reason, many people in modernity or modernist scholars of Islam don't like Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi too much. They say that he thwarted the natural development of Islam as such, and all sorts of accusations are laid against him. Some say that he introduced the idea of hadith as sunnah because he was an Arab supremacist. Some say he wanted to establish the supremacy of Quraysh, and all these sort of things. All he wanted to do was make sure that sunnah as we know it, the custom of Rasulullah as we know it, remains true to its essence, and hence there must be an independent way of verifying whether the sunnah accords with the custom of Rasulullah or not, and hence we have the integration of hadith and fiqh. So the point is that from that point onwards, what we get is a sure way of figuring out or finding whether something is something belongs to the sunnah or not. Of course, new things develop over time, and there are new solutions that need to be given for new problems. And what the ulama then decided was, what the ulama did was ijtihad. And ijtihad effectively, in this context that we are speaking about, means that through an internalization of the lifestyle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of his companions, of their understanding of deen, through a connection with your teacher, personal connection with the teacher, as well as a holistic awareness